I was the only person certified to pour the containment dome for a $4 billion reactor. But when the new director, Jacob Kim, decided my safety protocols were too expensive and that girls were a liability, he fired me on the spot. He didn't realize that without my specific NRC license and my signature on the concrete mix, the entire construction site had to legally shut down within 48 hours. The air inside the containment zone of Unit 4 always tasted metallic. It was a specific flavor, a mix of ozone, wet concrete, and the high-tension anxiety that comes with building something capable of powering a city or, if built wrong, poisoning a state. I adjusted my hard hat, checking the mix ratios on the tablet in my hand. "Nora," a voice boomed, echoing off the steel rebar cage that towered 50 feet above us. I didn't flinch. I finished typing the viscosity note before turning around. Standing there was Jacob Kim, the new director of operations. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car, and his hard hat looked like it had just been taken out of the plastic wrap. It was pristine, white, unscratched. "Mr. Kim," I said, keeping my voice level, "we're in a hard hat area. You need safety goggles." He waved a hand dismissively, like he was shooing away a fly. "I'm not staying long. I've been reviewing the logs, Howard. You're 3 days behind on the pour schedule for the dome." "We're 3 days behind because the humidity is at 90%, I explained, pointing to the massive atmospheric sensors. "If we pour the Type 7 rad concrete now, it won't cure properly. It'll crack within 5 years. The NRC mandates a humidity level below 85. Jacob stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale coffee. "The NRC isn't paying the interest on the construction loans, Howard. I am. Do you know how much a day of delay costs this company?" "I know how much a radiation leak costs," I countered. "My signature is the only one that clears this pour, and I'm not signing until the weather breaks." Jacob let out a sharp, mocking laugh. He looked around at the crew, mostly men, mostly young, all watching us. "See, this is the problem. I warned corporate. You get these specialists in here, and suddenly everything is about feelings and caution." He looked me up and down with a sneer that made my skin crawl. "Honestly, cutting girls are a liability in this industry. You overthink, you hesitate. We need momentum, not mothering." The silence on the deck was deafening. The hum of the ventilation fans seemed to stop. "Cutting girls." I repeated, my voice dropping an octave. "I have 20 years of experience. I wrote the manual on this concrete mixture." "And yet you can't seem to pour it," Jacob snapped. "I'm done with the delays. I'm bringing in a new team. A team that understands that time is money." "You can't just bring in a new team," I said, clutching my tablet tighter. "This requires a Level 5 certification. I'm the only one in the tri-state area who holds it." Jacob checked his watch, bored. "Everyone is replaceable, Nora, even you. Pack your things. I want you off my site in an hour." The walk from the containment unit to the administration trailer felt like a funeral procession. The worst part wasn't the firing itself. It was the sheer, breathtaking ignorance of it. Jacob Kim didn't just fire an employee, he had just pulled the pin on a grenade, and he didn't even know he was holding it. I pushed open the door to the HR office. Caroline, the representative, was already there. She looked pale. Jacob must have called ahead. "Nora, I don't know what to say," Caroline stammered, avoiding my eyes. She had a file folder on her desk. "The termination papers." He cited insubordination and failure to meet project milestones. "He called me a liability because of my gender, Caroline," I said, sitting down heavily in the cheap plastic chair. "You know that's illegal." "I know," she whispered, leaning in, "but he's the new golden boy for Mr. Brooks. The CEO thinks Jacob is going to save $20 million this quarter. If I fight him, I'm out too. I have kids, Nora." I looked at her. I wasn't angry at Caroline. She was a cog in the machine just like I was, but I wasn't just a cog. I was the linchpin. "Just give me the papers," I said calmly. "I signed them. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't threaten to sue, not yet. I simply signed my name, neatly and legibly, right next to the date." You need to turn in your badge and your encrypted key fob, Caroline said, her voice trembling. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the heavy black fob. This wasn't just a door opener. It was a digital cryptographic key. It was the only thing that allowed the central computer to authorize the mixing of the Type 7 concrete. Without this key, the batch plant would lock out to prevent unauthorized mixtures. Make sure Jacob gets this, I said, placing it gently on the desk. He's going to need it. 2 security guards were waiting for me outside. They were men I had shared coffee with, men whose families I knew. One of them, a guy named Miller, looked at his boots. "Sorry, Miss Howard," Miller mumbled. "Orders." "It's okay, Miller," I said, holding my small box of personal items. A framed photo of my daughter Aaliyah, a few engineering awards, and my lucky calculator. "Do me a favor. Don't stand too close to the north wall if they pour tomorrow. It's going to be unstable." Miller's head snapped up, fear in his eyes. He knew I didn't joke about safety. They walked me to the gate. I could see Jacob Kim standing on the balcony of the command trailer, watching me leave with a smug grin on his face. He thought he had just cut out a tumor. He had no idea he had just cut out the heart. My house was quiet when I got home at 2:00 p.m. It was strange to be home this early. Usually, I was pulling 12-hour shifts during a poor week. I set my box down on the kitchen island and just stood there, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. My phone buzzed. It was Aaliyah. "Mom, why are you home?" Kevin texted me. Aaliyah was 24, sharp as a tack, and working as a paralegal for a firm downtown. She also happened to be dating Kevin, my junior engineer, which was how she got the news before I even unlocked my front door. I called her back. "I'm fine, honey." "Kevin says he fired you." Aaliyah's voice was high and tight. "He says Jacob Kim called you a cutting girl in front of the whole shift. Mom, that's a lawsuit." "It is," I agreed, walking over to the window. I looked out at my garden. I had neglected it for months because of this project. But right now, I need you to do something for me. I need you to find the original contract I signed with the company back in 1998. It's in the safe in the study. The '98 contract, why, that's ancient. Because, I said, a slow, cold smile finally touching my lips. Back in '98, the company wasn't owned by the current conglomerate. It was a small, specialized firm. And when I developed the formula for the rad concrete, I didn't just give it to them. I licensed it. There was a pause on the line. I could hear Aaliyah typing furiously on a keyboard in the background. "Wait, are you saying?" "I'm saying that the Type 7 concrete is my intellectual property, Aaliyah. The company has the right to use it only while I am employed as the lead engineer. There's a termination clause." "Oh my God," Aaliyah breathed, "if you're terminated." "The license is revoked," I finished for her. "Immediately." "Mom," she said, her voice filled with awe. "They can't pour the dome without that concrete. It's specified in the federal permits." "Exactly. It's the critical path. If they can't pour the dome, they can't install the reactor vessel. If they can't install the vessel, they miss the federal fuel load deadline. And if they miss that deadline, they lose their federal funding," I said softly, "which is about $400 million. I hung up the phone and looked at the clock. It was 2:15 p.m. The shift change was at 3:00 p.m. Jacob Kim was probably patting himself on the back right now, thinking about his bonus. I sat down and pulled out my contact list. I didn't call a lawyer, not yet. I needed someone bigger than a lawyer. I scrolled past the local numbers until I found a name I hadn't dialed in 3 years. Adam Watson. I stared at the name on my screen. Adam Watson. Most people in the industry knew Adam as the guy who wrote the book on regulatory warfare. Literally, he had a best-selling textbook on nuclear compliance that was required reading for every inspector in the country. But to me, he was just Adam, the man whose career I had saved 20 years ago when a pressure valve blew on a reactor in Tennessee. He was a junior inspector then, green and terrified, about to be scapegoated for a maintenance failure he hadn't caused. I had the logs. I had the proof. I testified for 6 hours straight, clearing his name and wrecking the career of the negligent site manager who tried to frame him. I pressed call. It rang once, twice, then a click. Nora. The voice was deep, surprised, but warm. I was just thinking about you. I saw the news about the Unit 4 project hitting a milestone. Hi, Adam, I said, leaning back in my kitchen chair, watching a squirrel navigate my neglected bird feeder. I'm not calling about a milestone, I'm calling about a tombstone. That sounds ominous, he said, the warmth fading instantly into professional alertness. What happened? I was just fired, for cause, insubordination and failure to meet schedule. Silence, long, heavy silence. Adam knew me. He knew I didn't miss schedules unless the physics of the universe demanded it. Who? He asked simply. Jacob Kim, new director of operations, MBA type. He called me a liability, said cutting girls were holding back progress. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. He said that, out loud, in front of witnesses. About 20 of them, including my junior engineer Kevin. Okay, Adam said, his voice dropping into that calm, dangerous register I remembered. So, we have a wrongful termination suit. That's easy. I can recommend 3 sharks in your area who will eat him alive for breakfast. I don't just want a settlement, Adam, I said, my voice hardening. This isn't about money. This is about safety. He's trying to pour the Type 7 dome in 90% humidity to make a deadline. He thinks the Curring charts are suggestions. He's insane, Adam said flatly. That dome will spall within 5 years if it cracks under pressure. Exactly. But he fired me to get me out of the way so he could bring in a yes-man team. He thinks I'm just an employee. And you're not. Adam, I said, letting the silence hang for a second. Remember the '98 contract. There was a pause, then a low whistle. The proprietary mix clause, you still have that. I do, and since I was terminated for cause, which is bogus, the license for the Type 7 formula revokes immediately. As of 2:00 p.m. today, they are legally pouring counterfeit concrete. Oh, Nora, Adam chuckled, a dark, delighted sound. You didn't just get fired. You just turned their entire construction site into a crime scene. Aaliyah arrived at 4:30 p.m. looking like she was ready for war. She had a stack of legal pads and her laptop under one arm. Kevin was with her, looking terrified. Mrs. Howard, Kevin stammered, standing in my living room like he was expecting to be executed. I didn't know what to do. Jacob made everyone sign a new NDA immediately after you left. It's okay, Kevin, I said, pouring him a cup of coffee. My hands were steady. Sit down, tell me exactly what happened after I left. Kevin took the mug with shaking hands. He brought in a team from the other site. The B team, we call them, guys who usually do the parking lots and outbuildings. He told them to prep the pour for 6:00 a.m. tomorrow. Tomorrow? I asked, raising an eyebrow. The humidity is forecasted to be 92% tomorrow morning. I know, Kevin whispered. I tried to tell him. He said the sensors were miscalibrated and ordered us to override the safety lockouts. Aaliyah gasped, her fingers flying across her keyboard. He ordered a safety override. That's a federal offense, Kevin. I have the logs, Kevin said, pulling a USB drive from his pocket. I downloaded the command history before they revoked my access. It shows his login credentials authorizing the override. I took the drive. It was small, silver, and utterly devastating. Good job, Kevin, I said. Now I need you to go home. Do not go back to that site tomorrow. Call in sick. If that pour goes wrong, I don't want you anywhere near the fallout, legal or otherwise. Kevin nodded, relief flooding his face. He left and I turned to Aaliyah. Okay, I said. We have the firing, we have the safety override. Now we need the leverage. We spent the next 4 hours digging through my old files. The '98 contract was yellowed and brittle, but the clause was there, clear as day on page 14. In the event of termination of the licensor, Nora Howard, by the licensee, the company, all rights to the utilization of the Type 7 Radshield formula revert immediately to the licenser. Continued use constitutes theft of intellectual property and unauthorized modification of a federally licensed design. This is incredible, Aaliyah said, reading it for the 10th time. Mom, they literally cannot build this plant without you. The NRC permit specifies Type 7 concrete. If they use anything else, they have to restart the entire permitting process, which takes 5 years. And if they use Type 7 without my permission, I added, they are committing corporate theft on a massive scale. My phone buzzed again. It was Adam. Nora, he said, I made a few calls. I have a friend at the regional NRC office. He's very interested in a safety override on a nuclear containment dome. He's asking if you can file a formal whistleblower complaint tonight. Tonight, I asked. Tonight, if you file it now, it hits the system by morning, just in time for their 6:00 a.m. pour. The next morning, I woke up at 5:00 a.m. I didn't need an alarm. My internal clock was still set to construction time. I made coffee and sat on my back porch, watching the sun struggle to rise through the heavy, wet fog, 92% humidity. The air felt like a wet blanket. At 6:15 a.m., my phone rang. It wasn't Adam. It wasn't Aaliyah. It was Mr. Brooks, the CEO. Nora, his voice was smooth, cultured, and completely oblivious. I just got a very disturbing notification from our legal department. Something about an intellectual property dispute. Good morning, Mr. Brooks, I said, taking a sip of coffee. I'm surprised you're calling me. I'm no longer an employee of your company. Now, Nora, let's not be dramatic, he soothed. Jacob tells me there was a bit of a personality conflict. He felt a change in leadership was necessary to meet our aggressive timelines. But surely we can work out a consulting arrangement for the concrete formula. We can't have a silly piece of paper holding up a $4 billion asset. It's not a silly piece of paper, Mr. Brooks, I said, my voice hardening. It's a federal license. And Jacob Kim didn't just fire me. He fired the only person who can legally authorize the use of that material. Nora, please, he chuckled, a sound that grated on my nerves. We're all adults here. Name your price. A consulting fee, $50,000. We just need you to sign a waiver so we can proceed with the pour this morning. The pour started 15 minutes ago, didn't it? I asked. Silence. Jacob authorized it, didn't he? I pressed. In 92% humidity, with a B-team crew. The pour is underway, yes, Mr. Brooks admitted, his voice tighter. Which is why we need this resolved quickly. Just sign the waiver, Nora. We'll courier it over with a check. I'm not signing anything, I said. And Mr. Brooks, you might want to check your email. I just forwarded a copy of the whistleblower complaint I filed with the NRC last night, along with the digital logs of Jacob overriding the safety sensors. You did what? His voice cracked. I reported a deliberate violation of safety protocols on a nuclear site, I said calmly. And since you are now aware of it and haven't stopped the pour, you are personally liable as well. I heard a distinct thud on the other end, like a heavy object hitting a desk. You're bluffing, he hissed. The NRC won't stop a project of this size over a personnel dispute. It's not a personnel dispute, I said. It's a structural failure waiting to happen, and Adam Watson is already on his way to the site with a federal inspector. Who? Adam Watson, I repeated, the guy who wrote the book on why you're about to go to jail. I hung up. The sun was finally breaking through the fog, but over at the construction site 5 miles away, a storm was just beginning. I spent the next 3 days in my garden, pruning roses with a kind of meditative fury. My phone was off. My email auto-reply directed all inquiries to Aaliyah, who had taken over as my legal proxy. I knew exactly what was happening at the plant without needing to see it. Day 1, the pour would finish. The concrete would look perfect, smooth, gray, monolithic. Jacob Kim would be strutting around the site like he'd conquered nature itself. Day 2, the curing process would begin. This is where the chemistry happens. In high humidity, the water inside the concrete doesn't evaporate evenly. It gets trapped. Microscopic pockets of moisture form. Day 3, the shrinkage starts. Concrete shrinks as it dries. If it dries too fast on the surface because of wind or sun, but stays wet inside, tension builds. On the morning of the 4th day, I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls, 12 voicemails, all from the plant, and one text from Kevin sent at 3:00 a.m. It happened. I drove to the site perimeter. I didn't need a badge to see the dome. It was 10 stories high. From the public road, it looked majestic, but through my binoculars, I could see the frantic activity on the scaffolding. Men in white suits were spraying water, trying to slow down the current. It was too little, too late. Then I saw it. A hairline fracture running zigzag like a lightning bolt from the base of the dome up towards the apex. To a layman, it looked like a scratch. To an engineer, it was a scream. A black SUV pulled up beside me. The window rolled down. It was Adam Watson. He looked tired but grimly satisfied. "Nice crack," he said, nodding towards the dome. "Standard thermal shock combined with differential drying shrinkage," I recited, lowering the binoculars. "Textbook failure mode for high humidity pores." "The NRC inspector is inside right now," Adam said, "along with a structural integrity team. They found 3 more fractures on the interior wall." "How deep?" "All the way through," Adam replied. "That dome is structurally compromised. It can't hold pressure." "And Jacob?" "He's blaming the supplier," Adam snorted. "Says the batch was bad. He's trying to throw the concrete company under the bus." "Which would be fine," I said, "if he hadn't overridden the safety sensors that measure the mix quality." "Exactly," Adam grinned. "And if he hadn't used a proprietary formula he wasn't licensed to use." We watched as a sleek company car sped out of the main gate, followed by 2 police cruisers. "Is that him?" I asked. "No," Adam said. "That's the lawyer they just fired." The real show is about to start. The stop work order is the nuclear industry's equivalent of a death sentence. It's a red tag, physically affixed to the main gate, declaring that all construction must cease immediately due to critical safety violations. It freezes funding. It triggers federal investigations. It panics investors. By noon, the red tag was on the gate of Unit 4. I was sitting in Aaliyah's office when the news broke. The local news station had a helicopter circling the site. The chyron read, "Nuclear plant construction HALTED, critical flaws found in dome." My phone rang. It was Mr. Brooks again. This time, his voice was trembling. "Ms. Howard," he began, sounding like a man who had aged 10 years in 10 hours. "We need to talk." "I'm listening, Mr. Brooks." "The NRC. They've issued a Level 3 citation. They're talking about tearing down the entire dome." "They have to," I said simply. "You can't patch a containment vessel. It has to be monolithic. You have to demolish it and start over." "Demolish it?" He choked. "Do you have any idea what that costs? The demolition alone is $50 million. The delay is indefinite." "Yes," I said, "and whose fault is that?" "Nora, please," he begged. "Jacob Kim has been relieved of his duties, effective immediately. We want you back. We need you back. We need you to oversee the demolition and the new pour. We'll give you whatever you want. Double your salary, a new title." I looked at Aaliyah. She was typing notes, her face a mask of professional neutrality. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Mr. Brooks," I said. "You see, you didn't just fire me. You stole my intellectual property. You used my Type 7 formula without a license. That's a separate legal issue." "We can settle that," he rushed. "Name your figure." "I don't want a figure," I said. "I want a guarantee. I want full operational control of the safety protocols. I want a written admission of guilt regarding the safety override. And I want Jacob Kim to publicly admit why the pour failed." "Publicly?" Mr. Brooks hesitated. "Nora, that exposes us to massive liability." "You're already exposed," I reminded him. "The NRC report will be public record in 30 days. I'm just giving you a chance to get ahead of the story." I have to consult the board," he whispered. "Take your time," I said. "The concrete isn't getting any softer." That night, the storm finally broke. Rain lashed against my windows, heavy and cleansing. At 11:30 p.m., my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera. It was Jacob Kim. He looked wrecked. His suit was rumpled, his tie was loose, and he was soaked to the bone. He wasn't the arrogant director anymore. He was a desperate man. I opened the door, leaving the screen locked. "What do you want, Jacob?" "You set me up," he hissed, water dripping from his nose. "You knew the humidity would ruin the pour. You let me do it." "I warned you," I corrected him. "You called me a liability and fired me." "You could have stopped me," he shouted, slamming his hand against the frame. "You could have called the NRC before the pour." "I did," I said calmly. "I filed the complaint the night before. You ignored the stop order because you thought you knew better than the regulations." He stared at me, his eyes wide and wild. "Do you know what this does to me? I'm finished. No one in this industry will touch me." "That's the point, Jacob," I said. "In this industry, arrogance kills people. If you can't respect the physics, you shouldn't be building the container." "I was just trying to save money," he pleaded. "The budget was tight." "Safety isn't a line item you can cut," I said. "It's the foundation. Without it, you have nothing. Now get off my porch before I call the police." He slumped, defeated. He turned and walked back into the rain, a small, broken figure in the dark. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Mr. Brooks. "The board agrees to your terms," he said, his voice hollow. "All of them. When can you start?" "Tomorrow," I said. "But first, we need to talk about the settlement for the IP theft." "How much?" I looked at the number Aaliyah had calculated on her spreadsheet. It was a big number. A number that would ensure my daughter's future, my retirement, and funding for a scholarship program for women in engineering. "10 million, I said, and a public apology. Mr. Brooks didn't even argue. Done. The next morning, the site was unrecognizable. The massive cranes stood idle, their arms pointing accusations at the cracked gray dome. News vans clogged the access road, satellite dishes extended like hungry flowers. I met Adam at the gate. He handed me a hard hat. It wasn't my old, battered one. This one was brand new, gleaming white, with site director stenciled in bold black letters across the front. "Welcome back, boss," he said, grinning. Inside the command trailer, the atmosphere was funereal. Executives in expensive suits huddled around the conference table, looking at spreadsheets that bled red ink. Mr. Brooks sat at the head, pale and sweating. "Nora," he said, standing up too quickly. "Thank you for coming." "Let's be clear," I said, placing my new hard hat on the table. "I'm not here to save your bonus, Mr. Brooks. I'm here to ensure this plant doesn't kill anyone." I pulled up the schematics on the main screen. The crack in the dome was now visible to the naked eye from the ground, a jagged scar running 50 feet up the northern face. "The structural integrity report is in," I announced. "The concrete didn't just crack. The rebar cage inside has corroded due to the trapped moisture reacting with the accelerants Jacob ordered. The entire dome is scrap." A collective gasp went around the room. "Scrap!" One executive choked out. "That's $100 million of material." "Plus demolition costs," I added, "plus disposal of contaminated waste, plus the cost of re-permitting. Total estimated loss, $400 million. Mr. Brooks put his head in his hands. "And the timeline?" he whispered. 2 years, I said. "Minimum, you missed the fuel load window, you lost your federal grants. You are now solely responsible for the financing." The room went silent. The weight of the number $400,000,000 hung in the air like toxic smoke. "But," I continued, "I have a plan to salvage the foundation. If we act now, we can save the base slab. That saves you $50 million in 6 months." Every head snapped up. Hope, desperate and fragile, flickered in their eyes. "How?" Mr. Brooks asked. "By using the Type 7 formula correctly," I said, "and by following my safety protocols to the letter. No shortcuts, no overrides, no cutting girls are a liability speeches." "Done," Mr. Brooks said instantly. "Whatever you need." "I need full autonomy," I said, and I need Jacob Kim's resignation letter on my desk by noon. Signed, notarized, and public. The demolition began 3 weeks later. It was a slow, painful process. Giant hydraulic crushers chewed away at the failed dome, turning millions of dollars of hubris into dust. I stood on the observation deck, watching the destruction. Aaliyah stood beside me, holding a tablet. "The settlement money hit your account this morning," she said quietly. $10 million, tax-free, structured as a licensing fee for the IP theft. "Good," I said, not taking my eyes off the crumbling concrete. "Put half of it into a trust for the scholarship fund, the Nora Howard Grant for Women in Nuclear Engineering. And the rest." "Invest it," I said. "Safe, boring index funds. I'm done with high-risk ventures." "Mom," Aaliyah said, hesitating, "there's something else." We found another clause in the original '98 contract. It wasn't just about the concrete. I turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" "It says here," she tapped the screen, "that if the licensee, the company, is found to be grossly negligent in the application of the licensed material, the licensor, you, has the right to assume ownership of the raw data logs for educational purposes." So, Aaliyah smiled, a wicked glint in her eye. "Those logs contain the entire communication history of the project, including the emails between Jacob and Mr. Brooks, where they discussed firing you specifically to avoid paying your safety bonuses." I froze. "They put that in writing?" "Explicitly. She's too expensive. Get rid of her before the milestone payment." "That's fraud," I whispered. "That's criminal conspiracy." "It is," Aaliyah agreed, "and since you now own the data, we can publish it," I finished. "Not just to the NRC, to the public." I looked back at the demolition site. The dust cloud was settling, the air was clearing. "Do it," I said. "Release everything. Let the world see exactly how cost-cutting works in the nuclear industry." I was sitting on my back porch, watching the sunset. My garden was thriving. The roses I had pruned in anger were now blooming in riots of red and pink. The fallout from the data release had been spectacular. Mr. Brooks was forced to resign in disgrace. Jacob Kim was facing federal charges for falsifying safety records. The company's stock had tanked, only to be bought out by a larger, more responsible conglomerate that immediately rehired me as their senior safety consultant. I wasn't on site every day anymore. I had a team for that, a team led by Kevin, who had turned out to be an excellent manager once he wasn't being terrified by a tyrant. Adam sat in the chair next to me, nursing an iced tea. "You know," he said, looking at the peace and quiet of the yard, "they're calling it the Howard Protocol now. The new NRC guideline for concrete curing." "I heard," I smiled. "Catchy." "You changed the industry, Nora," Adam said seriously. "You didn't just win a lawsuit. You saved lives, maybe thousands." "I just did my job," I said, leaning back. "Someone had to hold the line." I looked directly at the camera, the setting sun casting long shadows across the porch. "If you take one thing from my story, let it be this: competence is your best defense. I made mistakes early in my career. I trusted that my hard work would speak for itself. I assumed that if I followed the rules, the company would protect me. That was naive. Corporations protect profits, they don't protect people. My biggest lesson: never, ever give away your leverage." That old contract from 1998. I kept it because I'm a pack rat, not a genius. But it saved me. Always read the fine print. Always keep copies of your work. And never let anyone, boss, spouse, or expert, tell you that your safety concerns are an emotional reaction. Here is my advice to you. Document everything. If it's not written down, it didn't happen. Keep a personal log of critical decisions. Know your worth, understand the specific value you bring. If you are the only one with a certification, that is power. Use it. Trust your gut. If something feels unsafe, it probably is. Don't let pressure override your instincts. In the end, concrete cracks, steel rusts. But the truth is the only thing that holds up under pressure.